So please welcome Rashid Kapadia. He's going to tell us about flow. Thank you, Jim.
"145 years ago, a man, a geologist from Switzerland, Albert Heim, a man deeply committed to science, being rational. He went with one brother and a few friends mountaineering in the Alps. A gust of wind caught his hat. He reached out without thinking, lost his balance, fell sideways. He flipped over, started spinning, rocketed towards the edge of the cliff. He was airborne for more than 60 feet. That would be 2 to 3 seconds. Now, under normal circumstances, this should be a terrifying experience. But Albert Heim, who survived the fall and investigated what happened to him very deeply, didn't find it terrifying. This is what he wrote. "I dropped into another dimension. My senses, they were incredibly heightened. My vision was panoramic. Time stopped. I looked up. I saw the faces of my brother and my friend, horrified expressions. But me, I felt no anxiety. I felt not even a trace of despair. No pain at all. What I did feel was a calm seriousness. What I did feel was a profound acceptance of everything that was happening. But most of all, what I felt was a dominant mental quickness. A dominant mental quickness." The fall is about 2 seconds. Let's give him 4 or 5. This is what he said he remembers happening in the fall. "I saw everything in slow motion. I had time to survey all the territory. I started making plans. I imagined a scenario where I had minor injuries. I then imagined one where I had serious injuries. Then I began to make rescue plans. I'm going to bounce here, I'm going to bounce there, I'm going to land here. Then I thought, I'm not really going to survive this fall. All of this, 2 to 4 seconds. Then I thought, oh God, I have to give a lecture at Oxford University next week. This was to be my first lecture in that hallowed university. What a pity. They're going to have to find someone else. Oh, I better try to protect my eyes. He tried to take his goggles off, but he didn't succeed. All of this in 2 seconds. Then he said, I said goodbye to all my family and my friends. Then I heard divine, heavenly music. And then I heard a thud and my fall was over. So this man, deeply committed to science, says, how did I get into such a profoundly altered state? What happened? Let me be a detective. Let me start thinking. Let me try to even figure out what happened to me, because I was alive. Started asking a few questions. How? How did I get into this profoundly altered state? How was I so calm? I mean, as project managers, you have panic. This would be a good time to be calm. Profoundly calm. My senses, how was I so aware of everything? How could I see everything? But where did that quickness come from? Where did that mental quickness come from? Now, this was 140, 150 years ago. So the only way probably to research it was to go to libraries and look for encyclopedias. What did Albert Heim do? He says, let me start with a survey. He finds 32 other people who had near-fatal falls. And to his astonishment, he finds that more than 90% report a similar experience. This is something I have to study. 21 years later, He writes a paper, an essay, Remarks on Fatal Falls. And to us, this is the first known systematic or scientific study of these profoundly altered states. They have been studied a lot ever since, but this is the first known study, and today we call this state flow. His finding, when we are engaged in a risk situation or in a risk activity, or even the perception of being in jeopardy, though we are not really in jeopardy, we can get into a different consciousness. It can trigger this altered state. And in this altered state, we have extraordinary mental capacities. That was his finding. My fellow project managers, I am honored to be back here to speak to you. Thank you all for coming. Today's talk is about flow states. We can cover just the basics. We'll do a few flow stories, extraordinary ones like Albert Einstein's, all completely different from each other, 4, maybe 5 stories. And we'll try to see if we can get into a low-grade state together by doing one activity or one exercise. Flow is a state of body and mind where we perform our best. How can you not want to be in flow when you're doing your work? And if that's not enough, normally it's in a state where we feel our best. We feel alive, we feel flourishing, we feel a complete sense of mastery over what we're doing. Effortlessness. Some key characteristics. Action and awareness, they merge. Time vanishes, self vanishes. You have no idea what happened to you or where the time went. But, unfortunately, it is one of the most elusive states known to us. What we do know is the doorway to flow is focus. Flow follows focus. To put it differently, when all our attention, when all our resources are focused only on the task at hand, that's when we drop into the flow state, when everything else vanishes. Subject matter expert after subject matter expert after subject matter expert have studied this. This is Ned Hallowell, one of the top 100 influencers in psychology, professor at Harvard. This is the way he puts it. Flow transforms an ordinary person into an extraordinary person. Whatever it is you're doing, if you drop into a flow state, your performance will be an order of magnitude superior. To put this visually, inside of you, somewhere there are the circuits where ordinary you can perform like a Superman. But instead of a telephone kiosk, we now know that what you have to have is an ACE, an attention-capturing event. Today's talk is about flow, and I want to persuade all of you that to get the best out of your project teams, to get the best out of yourself, out of your teams, both as individuals and as groups, one way to do this is to try and find ways to maximize flow on your projects. What I'm going to talk about. I bought the book. The Rise of Superman. And I couldn't believe what I was reading. These are extreme athletes who are mathematicians and PhDs in speaking multiple languages, and they had this experience and they were determined to figure out what was happening. And as I kept reading it, I kept saying to myself, this is the future. What is happening here is the future. And I made a lot of notes, and I read the book again and again, just trying to get the basics of it, because this is the future. What they have done to improve their performance is what we or future generations will be doing. This is the new frontier. And after reading it many times, I noticed a strange thing. Suppose you could grant me any wish. Anything at all. Some coaches say that if you want something, what would it be? Now, normally I would say many $1 million and houses and planes and yachts. But as I began to think about it, what do I really want? I began to say that I would like to get into this state, specifically when I'm dealing with people. If I'm dealing with you and the rest of the world vanishes, that's what I want. I want to be in this state when I'm learning, or when I'm reading, or when I'm writing, or when I'm speaking. When you read on the flow material, you'll come across this quote sooner or later. Don't ask what the world needs of you. Find out what makes you come alive. Go do that. Because mostly what the world needs from all of y'all is for y'all to come alive. So how do we get into flow? This is the theoretical part. 3 elements. There's something called a flow cycle. So if we can put ourselves into any part of this cycle, we increase the odds that we may find flow. There's something called flow triggers. What you surround yourself by to capture your attention. Flow triggers. And finally, there's something called a flow zone. We can keep trying to get into it. So the flow cycle consists of 4 phases: struggle, release, flow, recovery. Flow triggers is completely different. A trigger is anything that captures your attention. So he's isolated about 17 triggers that if you surround yourself by these, you increase the possibility of going into flow. And what those elite athletes did basically was this. They surrounded themselves with these triggers. Divided into 4 categories. One is external. Something external can get you into flow. Internal, the way you challenge yourself, your attitudes. 3 flow triggers internally, 3 flow triggers externally. The most important is social. When we are amongst other people and we behave a certain way, we can all push each other common attention to our task at hand. 10 flow triggers and creativity. Whenever you're doing creative work, it's a flow trigger. Third, we finished the flow cycle. We finished triggers. Now this is zone. This is completely different. Flow is a state between anxiety and boredom, and that's it. Summary. Third time, there is a state called the flow state. Clearly, it's available to everyone. Clearly, you can perform like Superman, or at least an extraordinary version of you, and feel at your best simultaneously. Its characteristics, action and awareness merge. I'm listening to it. Time vanished, self vanished. It's highly elusive. And it's always about focus and capturing our attention. There may be more to this than fiction. We may underestimate the power of an attention-capturing event to transform our abilities. There's a cycle called the flow cycle. Struggle, release, flow, recovery. There are 17 flow triggers. You'll be doing your project teams a huge service if you can surround themselves just by triggers. There is a zone called the flow zone. It's between boredom and anxiety. You will do your team a great service if you are not bored or anxious when you're with them. I submit to all of you all that if you want higher performance and even a better sense of camaraderie and flourishing on your teams, one way, not the only way, on your project teams, is to find ways of maximizing flow for your entire team. I submit to you, we are seeing a new frontier in human performance. And this may not be fiction. I submit to you that flow is a new frontier and it belongs to the future. This is the future of high performance, or at least a part of it.